Hello and welcome to this voyage of Boggle Rocket, where today we're flying back through time. I'm a little obsessed with folklore. You'll often hear me referencing real-world literature and legend alike throughout my LEGO reviews and retrospectives. Mostly these are references to pop culture inspirations like Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, the works of Akira Kurosawa and more. But there's one juggernaut of a LEGO theme which lends itself perfectly to discussion of classical symbolism and mythology. LEGO Castle. I should clarify that this will not be a timeline of the storyline of the castle theme itself. For lore of that kind, I would definitely recommend the Tavern Talk series by Bricking Up Brad. Instead, meshing my passions for LEGO and classics together, drawing on real-world literature and supported by studies from a number of key texts, I want to unpick the historical and symbolic inspirations behind the many iconic and much-loved factions of the original castle theme. This isn't intended to be a 100% accurate analysis either. I'm merely taking fiction and fact alike and describing some possible meanings to the already rich tapestry of this classic LEGO theme's narrative. Let's begin. LEGO Castle, naturally, is populated by knights, and there are two things which define these knights: their armour, or at this stage in LEGO's history, their helmets, and their heraldry, meaning the emblems and imagery adorning their shields, flags, and castle walls. Let's start digging and see if we can unearth anything which might point us in the right direction when we examine the first LEGO Castle set, the aptly named 375 Castle. This set starts a clear precedent which will prevail for the remainder of Castle's lifespan. Look, the ruling faction displays a monarch's crown, a clear and well-known symbol of power and rule, while visiting knights from a variety of regions approach the main gate. Clad in parade gear and led by a knight aligned with the castle itself, their intentions don't seem hostile, even if we ignore their permanently smiling faces. But it's their clothes which interest me most. The triple club emblem here, in colour as well as arrangement, mimics the traditional fleur-de-lis pattern of High Middle Age France. The closest I could find to this striped coat of arms is from the German Heigelmann Roll of Arms, a list of heraldry, but either way it's likely Saxon in inspiration, as many coats of arms in these regions bore similar patterns and colours. And the last is the most overt. It's simply the Maltese cross, symbol of the crusading Knights of St. John. Perhaps this last knight is actually returning home from faraway shores. So, already we see that the castle theme, from its inception, openly drew from the banners and trappings of Middle-Age European knights. LEGO Castle was inspired by the medieval period, you say? Not a very shocking observation, I know, but this proves a framework which allows us to examine the rest of the sets in the original castle waves through that same lens going forward. We also know, from the minifigures' helmets and armour, that the factions are all specifically Northern European in origin. No Conquistadors Morians or Corinthian-type Spartan helmets to be seen here. The most predominant is the Norman nasal helmet, identifiable from its crossguard, and this odd riff on the design to which I can't find a real-world counterpart. Kite shields crop up later in the theme, which we'll get to, and these were also introduced by the Normans, although the famous Bayeux tapestry depicts the English holding these as they were quickly adopted throughout the country, explaining why many of the other castle factions also used them. No, the original, iconic shields we're used to seeing bearing the factions' logos can best be described as heater shields. The smaller, lighter design evolved from that of the kite shields around the 12th century, and despite their small size, they'll carry most of the weight of LEGO Castle's narrative over the first decade of its life. To me, the main good guys of the theme are quite clearly the English. This faction was initially rather overtly known as the Crusaders. The lion rampant, which is standing on its hind legs, is still the real-world country's emblem and holds its closest associations with Richard the Lionheart. Lions naturally symbolise bravery across everything from the cowardly lion finding his courage to Aslan as a Christian parable in the Narnia franchise. The idea of the Lion Knights as an English faction is supported by the fact that in real life, wolves and bears, seen as symbols of pagan gods in opposition to the rise of Christianity, were hunted to extinction in medieval England. The lion only became the symbol of English religion, propped up as a figurehead due to its nature as a far more exotic creature from far off shores which would never be seen by the pagan population. meaning they were unable to ascribe any meaning of their own to the creature, and were thus more easily swayed to the Christian faith now that the embodiments of their forest deities were gone. The Lion Knights often wear more decorative armet helmets, identifiable by their hinged visor plate and eye slits, and seem to be the dominant faction with the largest sets dedicated to them across the castle theme. Maddeningly, a Lion Knight set entitled Viking Voyager sees the knights crewing a longship. Is it possible this all takes place before a defined rule, where warring factions descended from Viking invaders fought for occupancy, and the Lion Knights just held the most sure footing at that particular moment? Let's see if some semblance of an answer reveals itself as we examine the other factions in the castle theme. The Black Falcons were regionally referred to as Eagle Crest Knights in Australia, which helps us out a lot with pinning down their origins. Birds have incredibly powerful symbolism across history, associated with everything from freedom and angels to the unreachable bounds of the skies. The eagle itself is an incredibly powerful bird and historically holds association with the Holy Roman Empire in a design very similar to the Black Falcon's insignia. As a remnant from this era, modern Central European countries like Albania still have eagles as their emblems. As for this faction's more common namesake, the falcon is still admired for its speed and prowess. Perhaps this goes some way to explaining the Black Falcon's appearance in small, agile sets across the line, rather than bogged down in heavy fortifications like the Lion Knights. The Black Falcons wear what appear to be spangan helms, and I've only just realised while making this video that this encircling fringe on the mould is likely supposed to represent chainmail, not solid metal. So the faction is likely Nordic and Anglo-Saxon in nature. But another snag we run into is that the Lion Knights have also historically worn these helmets in the castle theme. However, these two factions are often seen together in earlier sets, parading on horseback covered with ornate chiffons, or with their heraldry adorning shields being sold alongside one another in the same armour shops. The two factions only seem to be pitted against each other with the advent of siege technology like the battering ram in the set of the same name, so perhaps they were two clans who shared a Nordic origin before splitting? The previously mentioned Norman crossguard helmets, after all, geographically pinpoint the faction's origin to these Slavic regions. As if to back up our hypothesis, falconry was a sport of Anglo-Saxon kings, placing it nicely on the timeline, with different species trained by different societal ranks. The peregrine falcon was flown by princes, which lines up nicely with the Black Falcons being the second largest LEGO Castle faction, second only to, that's right, the king. Beyond these two warring main factions, the Forest Men are introduced, bearing the stag as their emblem. These monarchs of the glen are traditionally associated with the woodland, and indeed, this faction rules over the forests. They are nearly always seen hiding chests or smuggling wealth, likely loot stolen from the rich to give to the poor. Though these are clearly Robin Hood types, with the typical feathered caps, green outfits and coin pouches on their belts, perhaps this reveals more about the surrounding lore than the overt reference might initially permit. In English folklore, and therefore in the Disney movie too, Robin Hood was operating around the time Prince John was vying for the throne in the absence of his brother, Richard the Lionheart. Are the Black Falcons and Lion Knights two edges of the same ancestral sword, linked by family ties but fighting for the right to the throne? It's worth noting that in Disney's adaptation, these anthropomorphic characters conform to the same metaphorical associations we're discussing in this video. The Forestmen themselves are certainly a scrappy underdog faction, with Lion Knight and Black Falcon patrols attempting to flush them out of their hiding spots in sets across the theme. Perhaps more than coincidence then that the animal selected for their emblem, the stag, was traditionally hunted in great numbers throughout medieval England. Huge parks like Richmond Park in London, where you can still see red deer today, were created solely for this purpose. When did this hunting of deer become popular among the ruling classes? Not until, would you look at that, the arrival of the Normans. Even beyond the history, deer mimic the Forestmen. They're prey animals by nature, while lions and falcons are predators, and they band together in herds and utilise fleet-footedness and hiding to outsmart those who would hunt them. At this point, we've examined the three main factions I'm sure most people think of when they hear the words classic LEGO castle, but they're far from the only clans making their way in this medieval world, and it's actually the lesser known factions which hold the richest symbolism of all. Before I go, I have to say a massive thank you to each and every one of you. Between making my 500 subscriber special and uploading this video, we rocketed past 1,000 subscribers on the channel. When I first started out, I had no idea this would be possible in the slightest, and it honestly still hasn't sunk in. But for now, that's all for part 1 of this voyage of Boggle Rocket. That's right, this is our first multi-part episode. The next destination on the horizon is the second part of this deep dive, and I hope you'll come along for the trip.